Why container ships load containers in a specific exact order. Every container on a massive cargo ship isn't placed where there's simply room for it. It's placed in one specific spot out of thousands of possible positions decided weeks in advance, because putting even one container in the wrong place can put the entire ship at risk. Before a single container is lifted onto a ship, a specialist called a stowage planner has already solved an enormous logistics puzzle. Using specialized software, they decide the exact position down to the specific bay, row, and tier for every single container the vessel will carry, sometimes tens of thousands of them on the largest ships. This isn't just about fitting boxes into available space. The plan has to account for where each container needs to come off the ship, how heavy it is, whether it holds hazardous materials, and how all of that combined weight affects the ship's balance in open water. Get this plan wrong, and the consequences aren't just inconvenient, they can be structurally and physically dangerous. The scale of this planning is genuinely staggering. The largest container ships in service today can carry over 20,000 individual containers on a single voyage. Every one of those has its own weight, destination, and cargo type, and every one has to be individually accounted for in a plan that has to be finalized before loading even begins. The most intuitive rule is also one of the most important. Heavier containers go low in the ship's hold. Lighter ones go higher, often stacked on deck. This keeps the ship's center of gravity low, which directly affects how it rolls and recovers in rough seas. A ship with too much weight stacked too high becomes what naval architects call top-heavy. It rolls more violently in waves, and in extreme cases, that rolling motion alone can become severe enough to threaten the ship's stability, independent of anything happening below deck. This is why you'll almost never see a fully loaded container ship with its heaviest cargo stacked at the very top of a deck stack. It's not a rule born from caution alone, it's basic physics that determines whether the ship handles predictably or dangerously in a storm. Naval architects calculate this using something called the ship's metacentric height, essentially a measure of how strongly it wants to return upright after rolling. Load too much weight too high, and that self-righting tendency weakens. The ship still floats, still moves, but its margin for handling an unexpected wave gets thinner than it should be. Here's a constraint most people never think about. A container ship rarely sails to just one destination. It stops at multiple ports along its route, unloading some containers and loading new ones at each stop. That means the stowage plan has to think in reverse order. Containers meant for the very last port on the route need to be loaded first, buried deepest in the stack. Containers for the very first stop need to be loaded last, positioned where cranes can reach them quickly without having to move anything else out of the way first. Get this sequence wrong, and a ship can end up doing something called overstowage, where a container that needs to come off at the next port is buried under containers destined for a port 3 stops later. Fixing that mistake at a busy terminal means unloading and reloading containers that were never supposed to move at all, costing serious time and money and disrupting the schedule for everyone else using that port. On a ship visiting 6 or 7 ports on a single route, this reverse order planning has to account for every combination simultaneously, not just this stop and the next one, but the entire remaining journey, all decided before the ship even leaves its very first port of call. Certain cargo comes with restrictions that override the normal weight and destination rules entirely. Containers holding hazardous materials often have to be positioned away from living quarters, away from certain other chemical classes they might react dangerously with if a leak occurred, and sometimes away from the ship's engine spaces entirely. Refrigerated containers carrying anything from produce to pharmaceuticals need to be positioned near power connection points so they can stay plugged in and temperature controlled for the entire voyage, which limits exactly where on the ship they can realistically go, regardless of what the weight distribution rules alone would suggest. Every one of these constraints layers on top of the others, which is exactly why this planning happens with dedicated software rather than a person simply eyeballing the ship and deciding where things look like they'll fit. Some ships also carry container types that need their own dedicated equipment nearby. Open-top containers for oversized cargo, or flat rack containers for machinery too large for a standard box. Each of these adds another layer of positioning constraints the software has to solve for, alongside weight, destination, and hazard classification, all at the same time. When stowage planning goes wrong, or when cargo weights are misdeclared and the actual loaded weight doesn't match the plan, the results can be serious. Ships have listed dangerously to one side after container stacks shifted or collapsed in rough seas. And in the most severe documented cases, hundreds of containers have gone overboard entirely, a direct physical consequence of a ship's balance being different from what the stowage plan assumed it would be. It's a reminder that behind every neatly stacked container ship gliding calmly into port, there's a mathematical puzzle that had to be solved correctly and held correctly for the entire length of the voyage. This is also why shipping lines take declared cargo weight so seriously, and why regulations now require verified gross mass certification for every container before it's loaded. An undeclared or underestimated weight isn't just a paperwork discrepancy, it's a number the entire stability calculation was built on. And if that number is wrong, everything calculated on top of it is wrong too. The next time you see a container ship, don't just see thousands of boxes stacked at random. See a puzzle solved weeks in advance, where every single piece has to stay exactly where it was placed, because on the open ocean, there's no room for a wrong guess. Somewhere behind that perfectly stacked deck, a planner already knew exactly where every box needed to go, in exactly what order, long before the ship ever touched water.